Do subscribe to my YouTube channel for some hot disability charcha and for juicy gender gupshup. Press the bell icon to keep hearing from your neighborhood disabled feminist.
So, hello everyone and good evening. And suddenly the mic has gone on, so I just thought, what happened? Can I have a show of hands of how many of you have watched a stand-up comedy show before? That's cool. You know, many people showed their hands, but I'm blind, guys. You can put it down. This is who I am. This is how I start. You know, being a woman comedian, and I choose these words and the sequence deliberately. Being a woman comedian in this country, being the first disabled woman comedian in this country, but also having an activist background, being a woman with a disability myself, what that journey has been of this art or using art as a medium to encourage larger conversations has been something that I hope to share with you, because they told me I have to come here and like satisfy people. I satisfy people's curiosity, because everybody's like, why art? Why this medium? Why do you do this disability through comedy? Why comedy? You know, how do you write things? How do you deliver? You're blind. Can you stand up? Can you stand on the stage? You know, all these questions. So they said you have to come and satisfy people. So I said, okay, I can satisfy people's curiosity because I'm disabled. And when you're disabled in this country, hows and whys and can you become a very regular part of conversations. Now, when you say, you know, I'll like sort of structure just my engagement with art and comedy through and talking about disability through art and comedy, I just thought I would structure it in three ways to just take you through my journey, to think about why did I decide to do comedy, or did I even decide to do comedy? Why did this happen? Where do I find the stories from? And the last one for me would be, what does that delivery on the stage mean to me? What's the impact both ways? What's the impact that's on the listeners, if there's any, on the audience? But what is the impact for me, on me as a comic? So let me begin with why comedy. And I have a short answer and a long answer. Which one do you want? Both. We have a lot of time. I'll give you both. So, the idea is that people ask me, why did you decide to do comedy? A simple one-line answer is because I'm an ass. I'm honest, you know. It's very interesting because I crack jokes at people and people laugh at them. They're like, "Acha, hum pe joke bana rahi ho, arey waah waah, bahut maza aaya." So there was once this, you know, when I started my activism, I was working on disability, sexuality, gender, so really rights of women and girls with disabilities. So one concerned gentleman, because gentlemen are always concerned about women and they always have something to say to them. So this very concerned man called me up and said, "Arey Baba, you're working on disability and sexuality and the rumor has gone around that now Nidhi Goyal only talks about sex." I had like a split second, okay? In that split second, I went from like shock to outrage to like falling off my chair, and immediately I said, I'm really offended. Like, why would Nidhi Goyal only know to talk about sex? What about doing it? And the person laughed. They wanted to make me uncomfortable, and they were like, ha ha ha, ha, you know, the uncomfortable chuckle. Men don't know how to express any emotion, including humor. No offense to the guys present here, but it's really interesting because that's what a comic does. You know, I love to make people uncomfortable. I love to point out at the elephant in the room. Somebody took it very seriously and said, "But tujhe to dikhta nahi, how do you see the elephant in the room?" And I said, I went to school and so I saw the elephant in the room and I understood what it means. But anyway, it was very interesting because when I did this as a kid, and I always did this, okay, it's got to do nothing with my disability. I always did this. But when I did this as a kid, I got chappal. Yeah, I got beaten up or shouted at. And I remember when I was like, I think 7, 8, no, not 7, maybe 10 or 12 or 11 or 8. Some that age where you're silly and stupid and you're just talking. And I was wrestling because I used to love WWF, and I had a crush on Bret Hart. But anyway, so I was playing this WWF with my 20-year-old male cousins. Okay, and I was all like, ha, I'm going to defeat you, and I'm punching them and all of that. And suddenly one aunt looks at my mother, and I remember, I think she looked at my mother very angrily, and she said, Jyoti. Yeah, as a kid, you're observing also things. I always observe things around me. And then she was like, ये क्या तुम्हारी बेटी को कुछ सिखाओ? ऐसे करेगी तो इसकी, how will she adjust with her sass? So I had just won the match and all that euphoria of winning WWF with male cousins. I said, Arey auntie, if I don't adjust with my sass, she will adjust with me. I didn't know it was a big bomb to throw on a aunt who thinks like I should be adjusting with my mother-in-law. And so, then you would all get like, oh my God, she's too sharp for her own good, etc., etc. But times have changed, right? Do we agree times have changed? There's some women. A man responded. Has time changed for women? Sirs here. So people are like, Arey, abhi aajkal women's liberation and times have changed. So I was like, times have changed. That's why when you pointed at the elephant in the room earlier, you got chappal. When you grow up and do it, you get money because it's called stand-up comedy. So I think, why I chose to do it, I think I have a personality which does all of this naturally. You can take your call, I can wait. So when you, we won't listen to you, you just take the mic, we'll just not strain to listen to you, whoever's phone it was. But the whole idea is that, when you have a personality that looks at the humor of things, right? And is mixed by this whole attitude of being an ass and being outspoken and all of that, and seeing the humor in situations. I think when I started losing sight, this humor came to me even more strongly. Because then I didn't only have the fun stereotype of a gender, I had the fun stereotype to deal with of disability. So the more I lost sight, the more I started seeing clearly how much of humor existed in this world. And one of the days, somebody had cracked some joke and they said something, and I retaliated as usual. And I was narrating that to a friend and my then mentor. And they fell off laughing from their chair and they said, Arey, you should be doing stand-up comedy. I said, are you serious? They said, yeah, we're very serious. So I said, okay, done, I'll do it. And I gave the commitment without thinking. Like I always make commitments, except in cases of men, because no matter how much you think and make commitments, they always go wrong. It's not a problem. So most commitments are done without thinking. So this was another commitment which I said, okay, now let's just like go ahead and do stand-up comedy. So the journey really started from there. It then became a thing about people asking me, saying, but where do you get your material from? I mean, they really thought I had a team of writers, like, like 5 people writing, and I pay like some heavy sums. Somebody came and told me कि तू तो पैसा देती होगी, तू शक्ल से अमीर दिखती है. And I'm like, अच्छा है मुझे दिखाई नहीं देता क्योंकि फिर मैं बहुत ही दुखी हो जाती. बैंक से अमीर नहीं दिख रही, शक्ल से दिख रही हूँ, थोड़ा disparity हो जाती. But these are the questions saying, how would you, again the whole thing, no, you're blind, how would you write? I'm like, that's why I'm putting my laptop here, not to like make notes right now, but I was like, hey guys, like I can operate this. So, and they were like, but how do you write? And I'm like, how all comics write? Their material is, their life is the material, right? So if you're at the airport next and you see someone staring at you, before you declare them as creep, go and tap them and ask, are you a stand-up comic? Because that's what they do. As many stand-up comics as I've chatted with, they've said that we look around, we look at people, we observe things, we listen to stories, we watch news when they're not yelling and making a total fool of themselves. We read newspapers and get data when it's not lying and it's not sounding like editorials. But we do all of that. We engage with the world. And our comedy comes out of engagements, narratives, stories, lives, realities, experiences, and our engagement with them. So I very smartly, I thought this is a fantastic answer because I was like, ये तो मेरा तो आ ही जाता है, मैं लिख ही लेती हूँ. But when people asked me, I said, array, my stories come from my life experiences because I had to give them a response, right? And then people were like, chal jhooti. I said, kya hua? What happened now? And they said, array, baba, you to do some big, you do this whole like issue-based comedy, your comedy is not on popcorn and chaiwalas and all of that. Your comedy is on disability rights and gender rights and, busting myths around disability. Yours is very issue-based. How can it be from your life? I have to really sit down and say, how can it not be about my life? Who am I? Woman. What is it? Gender. Who am I? Disabled. I'm a blind woman. And my set really comes from there. It's not about just living with blindness. It's about being a woman. It's about being single. And it moves, right? It moves with my experiences. And they're so authentic because you can check my flight tickets with when I make the set jokes, right? So I created a new joke and I went to the next gig and I was like, hey, last time I was in Delhi. And somebody could have really verified. They're like, हाँ यार ये थी इसके Facebook पे था Delhi गई थी. Last time I was in Delhi, I said, and it's very interesting because my life is so full of interactions. Because other than some personal things, I always have company and I don't do them alone. So it's some people caught on to it, but it's fine. Like coming and going happens alone, but like other things, I seek assistance for. Unpaid, free assistance. People like volunteer to support me and stuff. So, I say, oh, the last time I was in Delhi, and which has happened, okay, the Mausi there at the airport, when I wanted to use the loo, Mausi होते हैं ना, हम सब तमीज़ वाले होते हैं इंडिया में, तो मौसी जी को मैंने बोला, मैं जा रही हूँ, स्टॉल बता दो. And she said, अच्छा. I was very puzzled. I was like, क्या हुआ, गंदा है क्या? क्योंकि first thought in a public toilet when someone hesitates, I'm like, गंदा होगा, गंदा होगा. It's like, नहीं, साफ एकदम, मैंने साफ किया. ऐसे तो फिर तो ठीक ही होगा. So she's like, पर मतलब हो जाएगा तुमसे, कर लोगी? I said, मौसी मतलब क्या? बोले मतलब कर लोगी ना, अकेले इधर उधर तो नहीं होगा. I said, मौसी अंधी हूँ, मर्द थोड़ी ना हूँ. And I really said this in an interview, and then I was like, hey, and I'm peeing, and I'm like, oh, ये line लिखनी है यार, let me finish peeing quickly. But it's interesting because, there are many such conversations, and people are really helpful and nice. Okay, let me tell you, it doesn't only come from people being asses to me or like carrying stigma and all that big yarn. People are very helpful. So once a friend called me because in her life I was the only disabled person she knew. And she felt so good about it. She was like, oh, I know this disabled person. I've interacted with her. And I was like, oh, so cool. You're non-disabled. I've interacted with you. I feel equal joy. But she called me one day and she was super excited. Like I had to literally decipher her words, okay? She was like running one word into the other. And she's like, listen, there's this fabulous thing that's come out for helping all of you guys. It'll be superb. Your life will be transformed. I'm like, Shant, behen Shant, hua kya? She's like, acha. I said, सांस ले. So she actually inhaled. She said, अच्छा अब मैं बोलूँ? I said, हाँ please धीरे धीरे बोल. मैं क्या disabled हूँ ना, थोड़ा समझ कम आता है मुझे. So she actually went saying, oh Nidhi, there's this one thing. I was like, thoda fast बोल bore हो रहा है. But it was interesting because she said, oh, there's this fantastic thing that the government has come out with for all of you. I was like, this doesn't make any sense as a sentence, but sure. She said, but IIT ke saath kiya hai. I said, oh, ladko ke, but doesn't make even more sense, but sure. She's like, acha, listen na, there's this cane which has sensors. I said, what sensors? She's like, agar tu takrane wali hogi na, if you're going to bang into something. I said, what if I want to bang something anyway? And she's like, get serious, yeah. If you are going to bang into something, then this cane will start vibrating. I was like, no. She's like, why? I said, no. She's like, you disabled people, ek to we do something for you, as if she did it, okay? It's like, ek to we do something, suddenly became from the government with IITians, everything, okay? Maybe because her ex-boyfriend was an IITian, I don't know. Like, allegiance is last, right? So she was like, arey, but ek to we do something for you, and then you guys like do this, that. I said, saans le wapas. I'll tell you why. Because if in Mumbai, with this level of population, if I hold something in my hand that vibrates, my hand will turn into Shakira's bum. And like you laughed, women like things that vibrate, but not in their hands. So it was very interesting. And she got super like, whatever, right? But this was really an interaction. And it emerges from interactions. It emerges from interactions where, again, there are these split-second moments when a friend called me and said, I'm really upset, I'm never going to take my wife out again. And I said, ये क्या हुआ यार? ये मतलब हर मर्द बोलता है कभी ना कभी, पर तुझे क्या हो गया? So he's like, यार, both of us are blind. We were sitting on the beach and like these two pandus came and one of them said to the other saying, इसको दिखता नहीं है, इसको दिखता नहीं है. The man doesn't see, how will he know where to put? So I paused, and because it was on behalf of somebody else, I held the anger for like 3 Mississippis more. And then I said, अच्छा अच्छा यार अच्छा हुआ बता दिया, क्योंकि today I found out that all sighted men have little torches clipped to their. The tech savvy ones simply use Google Maps to find their way, right? So it's interesting because for me, a lot of the set comes up through interactions. A lot of the set comes up through responses, the auto mechanism that I have not developed. People think I have developed this mechanism. And somebody came up to me and said, and this was on a dating website. Can you imagine? Like I was on Coffee Meets Bagel and I shared a link of my comedy to share that I'm blind, because you have to apparently disclosure clause hota hai na, unsaid disclosure clause hota hai on all the dating websites, that if you're disabled, you have to disclose, like with everything to how much degree and all that. So I generally chat and then I send the link and this guy is like, the ways people find to cope with their pain. That's when I came up with this line. I was like, I'm not a comedian because I'm in pain. I'm a comedian because I'm an ass. So didn't go down well with him. We never went out on a date. But how life experiences change and emerge, and that's how the comedy changes and emerges for me. Right? And so you will find 5 years ago, I was still looking for a husband. Now I'm like, ye date kitni bekar thi. So it really grows on me. But what again becomes very important when as a stand-up comic, when as a woman with a disability, I'm not just asked what pain am I trying to conceal, and do I use this as a exercise to sort of cope with my pain? There is pain. And that doesn't need a comic element. Why should we expect that comedy becomes almost cathartic and we use it as a tool all the time to cure ourselves, right? Or to heal ourselves, whichever way you want to put it. There is a lot of pain that happens in lives of all people with disabilities. And if you're a woman with a disability, there's like this, people call it double stigma, I call it complicated stigma, and experiences, right? And it's so problematic. So when, when people said, maybe you could use this also to cope with their pain, so 2-in-1 fayda ho jayega, pain bhi chala jayega, set bhi ban jayega. So I sat down, ek baar, I was like, chal, pen, paper nahi to laptop, keyboard leke baithte hain. I sat down and I thought of the pain. It didn't go away. I was struggling for post-graduation. I wanted to do mass comm. And I remembered when I thought of some of the most painful memories, I remembered when I was applying and they called me 2 days before, unofficially, 2 days before the entrance exam. And they said, oh my God, nobody has time for your shit and your baggage in this college. It's a postgraduate competitive thing. How are you going to even survive in this course? And how do you think you can even imagine that you would do ad campaigns and make documentaries and things like that? You're blind, let's get that clear. It was 1 year of hellish trauma. And the only joke I could make from that was, I don't have a baggage, you probably looked at my tummy. It's a feeble joke. I never used it. But I'm just saying that there is a level of pain sometimes in life which doesn't need to get translated into comedy. I don't think it does. But coming to other pains, as a comic, that's not your only pain, because your pain really starts when you get onto the stage. And I remember the first time I got onto the stage, and it was very interesting because I'm a very stage person, okay? I'm very relaxed, I'm very chilled, I like talking. My phone bills are like an evidence to that. I remember I was 16. No, I didn't get my phone at 16, wait, 18. I got my first phone at 20. I told my father, don't give me food to eat, but please don't cut my pocket money on my phone bill. So that much I like talking, right? And I've always been on the stage, dancing, performing, debating, doing other things since I was a kid. Stage was not my fear. When it came to delivery, my concern was there's an immediate loop of feedback. मतलब हंसे नहीं तो फट गई, right? It's literally that. So first time I went on stage and people are like, oh my god, you must be having stage fright. I'm like, nahi yaar, I have feedback fright. I don't have stage fright. And I have instant feedback fright. बाद में तो कुछ भी बोलो क्या फर्क पड़ता है? पहले क्या बोलोगे? But I remember still, I cracked the first joke and the auditorium, like I don't know if it burst into laughter, whatever happened. But when people laughed, it gave me energy to go on. It gave me too much energy to go on. They'd allotted me 15 minutes. I went on for 27. So next time, wherever I go, and today also I told Samira, please do a tring in between if you don't want me to eat into Shreya's time and your dinner time and your sleep time. But it was another experience. It was a fabulous experience. It was an experience where I also sort of sensed the audience. Listen, I don't have a sixth sense. Like everybody senses the audience mood. I was sensing. Like when people sannata tha, to I understood ye kuch gadbad ho rahi hai, right? But it was amazing to like shift gears, be spontaneous, be witty, not be witty, hold back, let things sink. And I think that gave me a boost as a performer. But what gave me boost as a disability rights activist, which I am for nearly a decade now, was the impact it left on the audience. There was one woman from Delhi. She was in Calcutta at that time. I don't know why. Like Delhi, Calcutta has some love. People keep going here and there. And she was like, I've come from Delhi. I'm like, for my show. I got super excited. She's like, nahi, I just came here. I was like, okay. She's like, but don't get disheartened. You know, I really loved your show. I was like, now it's okay. Now go on. You know, it's feeling nice. So she said, but you know what? When you were cracking all these jokes of how stupidly people assist you, I said, I never use the word stupid. She's like, no, but it sounded stupid, no? I was like, but you're calling yourself that. And she's like, exactly. I thought, oh my God, I also assist people with disabilities like that only. If there are 4 steps, I keep saying step. So she's like, I found it. I was laughing and I was cringing at the same time. And I was like, ये तो काम हो गया. ये तो जब मुझे धरना नहीं देना होगा, मैं जाके comedy करूँगी. Right? And we'll come to that. But this gave me a lot of determination, a push as an activist to move forward. There was a push as a performer and a push as an activist. But the next day, the show got covered in a mainstream newspaper, who I will not, for purposes unknown, will not take the name. But mainstream newspaper, fairly mainstream, gave out half my set, wrote down jokes. But all the journalists here are like, oh my God, who was this? Give me the name. Now they'll go do Google and all after this. I know that. They're like, who is this trashy journalist? But anyway, they gave out like significant number of jokes in that small limited word count, but also said a line which I never remembered saying. That Nidhi Goyal said on the stage in Calcutta that she's not a virgin anymore. And I was just like thinking, right? I was really scratching my head and I was thinking, I was like, ये कब बोला मैंने? क्या हुआ था? Context क्या हुआ था? एक तो stand-up comedy में people respond, you respond, people respond, you respond, you say things, and then men come up to me and say, you really think we're trash? And I'm like, no यार, वो तो comedy में था, छोड़ दो यार, बुरा मत मानो. But so I was trying to think, right? But because it was my first show, I still recalled it very quickly. And there was a joke around me being a virgin. And I used the word virgin. And as you can expect, like it happened here just now, सन्नाटा हो गया. सन्नाटा हो गया तो मैंने mood light करने के लिए spontaneous joke क्रैक किया. Which did not, by the way, say that I am not a virgin anymore. Can be quote, not in these words. Like you cannot quote this, right? It was quoted as something that I said. So misrepresentation of what I did as a young woman. People say I don't qualify as young anymore at 34, so now I'm okay, you know. It's but as a young woman in her mid-20s or late 20s, or even as my first show, right, as a performer who did her first show and who laughed at this whole rumor around disability, sexuality, activism and said, oh, Nidhi Goyal knows to talk about sex, and all of that came back to me and I said, how obsessed is this country with like a piece of skin? Virgin bola to alarm upar, kaan upar, pata nahi aur kya upar. But like just so much of engagement, right? And that got shared and reshared on Facebook. That's when I learned that आधे लोग article पढ़ते नहीं हैं. Brilliant, because I will come to a close. I mean, now that I know it's 10 minutes. But, that got circulated. I was very, very worried. I was like, oh my God, I went for my first stand-up show. And what if this reaches my parents? Because, unlike all of you, I have my mom on Facebook with me and my aunts on Facebook with me. I mean, I feel like they better know it from me than the 2000 gossips that come around. Nothing happened. And my parents are not the ones who skip like articles and don't read it. They read it. And nothing happened. And that's when I felt really, really empowered as a comic and as a woman myself. From there, I moved to this first performance in a commercial setup at the Canvas Laugh Club. The first performance, for the first 2 minutes, nobody laughed. I only had 10 minutes and they blow a whistle at you till you get off the stage. हाँ, because दूसरे कॉमिक को पैसा दिया होता है और सीनियर कॉमिक होते हैं तुमसे बहुत ज़्यादा पे किया होता है. So you can't eat into their time, okay? So as soon as they blow a whistle, that's the only time I responded to a man's whistle. like he was blowing a whistle. I was like, हो गया, आ रही हो. Nobody laughed. And I was really disturbed. I remember that I kept a friend of mine awake till like 3 in the morning after the show. And only time when I kept a man awake in my stress and not doing other things. But it was very interesting because like he and I were thinking, he was like, oh, but this is how mainstream comedy is. He gave this general gyan, and finally I found a way to connect with the audience. But it left me with some lessons, right? It left me with these lessons, circling back to the words that I began with, being a woman, disabled comic, right? And that woman element, and everybody kept saying, "Acha yaar," like you're a woman in a man's world. I'm very amazed how we still keep saying these things in different professions, in different spaces. That you're a woman in a man's world. I'm like, these worlds still exist. It's so like amazing. But that made me realize that really for women comics, it's about whose voice is accepted in which spaces. And connecting it more and more to activism, which is always about voice, and whose voice is accepted in certain spaces. And which kinds of, what is that voice saying, right? So if a male stand-up comic starts his set with like, I went down on her, people will be like, ha, 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 so cool, so cool. And a female stand-up comic starts by saying, I went down on him, it's going to be received in a very difficult way, right? I want to tell all the male comics at some point, or like all the man's world people, कि तुम लोग को क्या यार गाली तो हमको भी देना आता है, शायद तुम लोग से ज़्यादा आता होगा. चल भेंडा, I mean भेंडा भाई, भेंडा pra, sorry. But it's really interesting because how certain voices, but what those voices are saying also is managed, right? And then for me, there was another thing about who's considered as normal in these situations. And I remember that one of the conversations from that upset conversation with my friend was like, why the hell is the onus on me in every space? Why is the onus on me in like this space, that space, activism, tourism, comedy, profession, education, everywhere it's the onus is on me to make people comfortable around my blindness. Why can't I be just a comic who you judge on the comedy, right? And so for me, it was also interesting to see who do we allow to challenge the status quo, right? So we have 30, 40 years of women's rights activism that has gone behind and all the women comics are riding on the back, of course, starting with their own struggles and journeys, but still riding on the back of that kind of activism. But women with disability movement is really nascent. So whose back are we riding on? And are we allowed yet to challenge the status quo? So I became this very nice, celebrated, like this first female disabled comic. And I was like, chal yaar, मैं तो ले लूँगी title, कोई problem नहीं है. But मेरा question है, first मैं क्यों इतने साल से सब लोग कहाँ हैं? और क्यों humor नहीं हो सकता disability के साथ, right? And the whole idea that I pakka get invited for shows, like lots of times, but like pakka when it's 3rd December because it's International Day of Persons with Disabilities, and around 8th March, and I'm like, abhi 7 ही दिन है 8th March वाले week में, how do I give you like the 12th appointment, right? But really opening up spaces becomes really interesting. And that's why I keep saying, and people are like, but you're doing activism or comedy, and I'm like, why does it have to be necessarily different? right? It is activism and comedy. Comedy for me is, I didn't mean it to be, but it became a tool for my activism. And people are like, हाँ हाँ ये अच्छा है, हाँ देख एक्टिविस्ट तो सब लोग धरने वरने में तो देख अभी कितने सारे लोग जाते हैं, बहुत सारे लोग एक्टिविस्ट हैं, लेकिन ऐसे डिसेबल्ड कॉमेडियंस बहुत कम है. यू बिकम कॉमिक ओनली, because also you can catch more flies with honey than vinegar. Is it fly पकड़ना है क्या तो पूछ ले पहले. But the whole idea, I was like, party shoes or sports shoes अपनी अपनी जगह पे अच्छे लगते हैं. It's a different tool. I cannot be laughing about shit policies that are made. I cannot be laughing about rape of women. I cannot be creating sets around that. I need my activism. I need my activism from everything from simple to serious. I need to shout about some things. I need to smile about some things. I need to request about some things. And if you don't still listen, then the joke is on you. And so I make a set on you. So, for me, really comedy is, and when I remove all of this gyan from behind, for me, comedy is storytelling. When I kept saying that comics for them, it's all about interactions, people, experiences, observations, engagements. What is it other than storytelling? Everything that I do writing, I do training, I do advocacy, I run campaigns, I really engage, amplify voices. Everything for me is storytelling. But comedy is a storytelling with timing, with vulnerability, and with responsibility, because more and more philosophers are getting quoted less and less, and comedians are getting quoted more and more. Thank you so much. I'll wait for the Q&A. अच्छा अभी यकीन हो गया हो तो बंद कर दो लैपटॉप.
Do subscribe to my YouTube channel for some hot disability charcha and for juicy gender gupshup. Press the bell icon to keep hearing from your neighborhood disabled feminist.